Well, Xena and Posse, the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. Okay, so as a CTI analyst, there's a lot of information out there. And sometimes I can feel a little overwhelmed by all the information that's coming at me. And it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose every single day. So after years of research and speaking with security professionals around the world, I came up with some ideas as far as how to manage and how to analyze the large volumes of data coming at me. And I called it an adversary detection pipeline. A little bit about us. I'm a CTI analyst. I'm also Cheerio on the Twitters. We have a pen tester with us. Her Twitter handle is boomslang. She's right there. And then unfortunately our SOC analyst wasn't able to join us today. It was Glitch. And then we also have Wookie on the line, and he's a red team tool developer. So very fancy. He knows all the coding stuff. So this is for the lawyers. We are speaking on behalf of ourselves, and basically we're presenting in our own individual capacity, and we are not speaking on behalf of our employers, like not at all. It's just us, it's our opinions. So we'll start with a discussion of some pain points, then we'll go into some background information, and then finally we'll get into some adversary detection pipelines. So we're actually looking for people just like you, people that are looking to create value with Excel and not necessarily needing to have those fancy coding skills like Wookie has. I mean, you can have them, it's definitely helpful, but providing value to the organization isn't contingent upon being able to fancy code, right? And then all you gotta do is just have some analytical thinking skills.
So in my experience, some pain points that we see are there's a lot of outdated or not timely intelligence. What this means is that there's just not relevant intelligence per your organization. And we need to make sure, and we got to do a better job of making sure the intel is actually intel per the organizational needs. If you don't have Apache struts, then the intel for it is not really relevant. Instead of focusing your resources on what you think might be happening, why not check your internal attack data first? Many organizations get caught up on sexy or flashy APTs, such as Fancy Bear, APT10, Lazarus Group, or whatever, but instead look at what is actually going on in their network and your landscape.
And then bouncing off the idea of sexy APTs, coming from a red team perspective, we also want to make sure that we're not just focusing on these sexy attacks. So as a red teamer, I know that red teams can sometimes have egos, and sometimes those egos can be fed by blue teams. It's important for the red team and the people that are working with them to keep things real, keep things grounded. Not every engagement needs to be a sci-fi extravaganza. A relevant red team that is, emulating realistic attacks and realistic situations actually provides more value. For example, there's so many awesome hacks going on right now, but one that really stands out to me in my experience, the Hacker Playbook 2 by Peter Kim has this really cool section about printer hacking and pivoting from printers and malware on printers. And I was in an engagement enjoying my traversal through the network, and I found this printer that was like perfect for this hack. Spent 6 hours hitting it and got nowhere, and then turns out the best thing there on that network for me to attack was a low-hanging fruit. So making sure that you're ultimately moving to more sensible models and recording that low-hanging fruit and knowing what this network is seeing, what a business may be seeing, and what real-life experiences might involve.
A lot of teams seem to be operating in silos, doing their own thing, sectioned off with no communication. Communication breakdown is one of the most common things in most organizations. Using adversary detection pipelines, we could remedy that by setting common goals between purple team exercises, structured and unstructured hunt activities, as well as intelligence-driven emulation. One of the main benefits is breaking down walls and silos with a shared mission or vision for collaboration. Many organizations are not using adversary detection pipelines, but they are focused on, machine learning or AI or any other kind of coding skill focus areas. AI and machine learning might be out of reach for a lot of newer analysts, but there are simple tools like Excel and using some analytical thinking. These things aren't often talked about when it comes to building out threat intelligence. Companies are concerned about popular threat actors, open source IOCs, but they don't often have the staff and don't really know where to start. It is imperative that CTIs are delivering timely intel to other departments.
All right, so we'll go into some background information just really quick so that we can be on the same page. Attribution is hard. Definitely, there's different multiple frameworks, not just forensic and indirect, but there's also technical and a bunch of other parties that might need to get involved. For instance, forensic attribution. Look at all of those things that DFIR or your incident response team would need to get from malware that lands on a system, right? That's a lot. So basically, TTPs versus true attribution. Robert M. Lee, he suggests that most tactical folks shouldn't consider attribution. It's highly, highly abused and resource intensive with little value. So what do we use instead? TTPs. We focus on the how and what of attacks versus the why, which is attribution. So how do you make TTPs? MITRE ATT&CK put out a training with Katie Nichols and Adam Pennington, and they did such a good job. There's just no way I could do a better job. So I definitely recommend checking that out. So now we'll get into adversary detection pipelines. So basically, it's just a way of prioritizing threats that come into your particular environment or that could impact your organization via structured and unstructured formats based upon or filtered upon the business initiatives, your departmental, whether that's your internal security teams or third party or whomever it is that CTI engages with. It just depends on the business structure. And then also to the CTI team initiatives. So it's, for the purpose of this talk and the time that we have, we'll limit it to the delivery phase of the Lockheed Martin kill chain. Joshua Stevens, in his RSA talk in 2015, he shared about structured and unstructured threat hunting. So what I did is I backed that up a little bit, reverse engineered it, and I'm like, hey, why don't we create structured and unstructured adversary pipelines to feed the structured and unstructured threat hunting. So structured adversary detection pipelines would be known threats, IOCs, TTPs, kind of like the real-time analysis. You can actually see something on the paper, going with that. And then unstructured would be the undefined threats and new TTPs. So like I said, the focus would be the CTI team, your security team, and the business in order to help funnel the different information. So with CTI team initiatives, I'll be looking at my internal attack data and then also externally towards using some of the public threat reports that are available and making my assessments. Right, so Scott J. Roberts in CTI squad goal setting requirements, and then Brian P. Kime in TI planning, they put together some really awesome information for kind of like the information that you'll need in order to move forward with this, and definitely take a look at both of those resources to get an idea of your operational environment. And then finally, the data collection requirements. Rebecca Brown and Robert M. Lee, they put out the SANS CTI survey, and on page 7, they have some data collection requirements that I highly recommend looking at. As far as if you aren't looking at DOJ indictments, take a look at those. They have a lot of helpful tips and a lot of information in that particular survey that can help build out this particular program. So how do you analyze a threat and prep and prioritize, right? That seems like a lot. Well, you can use the DREAD model, you can use the FAIR model, you can use your own company's internal risk model. I believe David J. Bianco and Kat Self at the, they did it at the SANS Threat Hunting Summit in 2019. And then also they did it in Europe. They did a whole talk around a risk model that they came up with. I highly recommend looking at that if you're interested at all. Another option that you could look at internally is going with the basic definition of a threat, which is intent, capability, and opportunity. Obviously, you know, we're going to be looking at the delivery phase of the Lockheed Martin kill chain. So if you're getting all these malicious emails coming at you, obviously the bad guys have an intent to try to compromise you. So then we go to capability. And capability typically refers to like what they're using, like what type of malware. So for me as a CTI analyst, how do I tell the difference between Emotet and TrickBot? Like how would I rate them differently if both of them are blocked? I couldn't really come up with a good solution or idea to that. So then what about opportunity, right? Opportunity is basically how much the bad guys know about your particular environment. So let's say, for instance, you allow Google Docs and Google Drive, and let's say you get campaigns like that coming at your org. Okay, well, that could be a coincidence. Maybe they don't really know. Right? Okay, so then we dig further into that campaign or that email, and we see that, well, they sent it to a service account that's publicly available, and you can just find it by a really quick Google search. So of course you're like, okay, well, that's kind of obvious, but let's take it a step further. And let's say they send it to an actual email address within your organization, right? And then let's take it one step further where they use social engineering tactics to spoof their boss. Now that's pretty intense, right? So I'd probably rank them a little bit higher as far as knowing the particular organization. So that's just an idea for you to play with. So once you get all that information, then you want to group them. So since we're starting with the delivery phase, you want to grab all the malicious email campaigns. And then this is where the diamond model comes in, where you use TTPs or the capability infrastructure, which is kind of like USBs or Google Docs or SendGrid, constant contact. And then you also look at the victim and understand like the department and teams and what's going on specifically. Like, are they spoofing a boss? Are they spoofing, you know, something that seems a little bit more than just sending it to a service account? Second of all, the second phase, you can also look at your internal data sources, such as your WAF attack data and your DFIR/SOC tickets. And Robert M. Lee suggests when you group all of these threats together to allow flexibility with your naming convention. So for instance, if you just name them like 12354 and then another one is 12554, like that's really hard for me as a CTI analyst to keep track of, you know, especially with all the information that would pertain to those particular threat actors, threat activity groups. The same also, you know, let's say that a bunch of the IPs map back to China or Russia, you know, and then grouping it that way. But then the next day they have the same TTPs, it's just the geolocation changes. Like, then I have to, do I change the name? Like, how do I do that, right? So having flexibility and choosing your own names is very helpful. So with this, I used a hacker name generator, and they're pretty, from my perspective, easy to remember. And then you group all that information. You can show the campaigns, the volume, delivered, clicked messages, and that gives the CTI analysts a pretty good idea about what's going on in your particular threat landscape based upon your internal attack data. And if you like colors, heat maps are really helpful too. So I can look at that like really quick and see, oh geez, like the red, that seems kind of bad. I should probably look at that, right? Whereas, I don't know, override, I probably wouldn't look at right now because they historically don't send campaigns this time of year. You can also use the attack navigator. That's a really great resource. The overlapping TTPs for the various threat activity groups are dark purple. So utilizing that can be definitely helpful. And the malware variants that you get, if you know the TTPs for them, you can throw them in the attack navigator, get a beautiful map like that, and then be able to prioritize what to tackle and look into how your defenses are for a particular area, or get an idea of just why are they favoring this one over another one? Is it just common? Is it specific to us? Like, are they changing it for some reason? Just asking questions based upon analytical thinking, right? And then if you don't like Attack Navigator or you don't like colors, this is from Excel, and it's just a really, really basic graph. And then unstructured. So we break it down into the various TTPs and users, as you can see, who click the most, who's infected the most, and then the various departments and teams. So this gives me an idea when I'm building out stuff for the, when you build out stuff for the unstructured threat hunting team, you'll have a particular time frame, and then based upon the team initiatives, you can narrow that down. Also, too, threat actor dossiers. So depending upon what type of CTI analysts you have, some of them really love tradecraft. Other ones just want the basic info. Also, specific procedures tend to be helpful for Red Team in understanding what exactly this threat actor does beyond just saying they send malicious links. Like that doesn't help. So here's an example. Here are some of the TTPs laid out and a heat map with the corresponding information and the finished product. So this would be ready to go, ready to hand out, ready to manipulate and change based upon the teams or the org or the management's needs. And that way, you know, as a CTI analyst, I can be like, bam, here's the information. Whatever you need. And metrics. So metrics, you can do metrics a lot of ways. You can track the analyst performance, and you can track changes within the organization based upon the information that CTI provides to measure the usefulness of it over time. So.
And with our security team initiatives, they're comprised of many of the security teams within the security department of an organization. So that can include your SOC, your threat hunting team, red team, digital forensics, incident response team as well. And while they all have different goals, the one main goal that they all share is that they're finding out how to contribute to the overall security of the organization. So that would include a lot of collaboration between the teams and how teams can benefit from sharing their wants and needs with each other to be able to efficiently protect the organization. And what we can learn from the security team initiatives is understanding the various security teams' annual goals that can help prioritize cyber threat intelligence, intel, and data to provide to those internal teams. And what that's going to do is going to narrow the scope of the intelligence to efficiently process that data and also add value to the organization. So instead of threat intel analysts handing us, you know, such as like the SOC, for example, data that's blind, what we're going to do is, or what they would do is prioritize this data so we have a scope to focus on. So for example, in the slide, we see that Wire has 14 messages that's delivered. We would want to prioritize that data because of the high volume, high delivery rate, as opposed to say Ranger, which has you know, no data there. And Matt Bromley, in Thinking Like a Hunter from the SANS Reading Room, in April 2019, shared some tips for threat hunters that CTI analysts can use to provide more value to their internal teams. So for example, CTI would package that data intel for Q1 and focus on wired TTPs and the departments or teams or even users that were targeted by wire. Basically, unstructured adversary detection pipelines help hunt teams perform intelligence-driven, unstructured threat hunting to be able to efficiently protect the organization.
So bouncing off how the blue team can use this information, the data layout also works really well for red team. All the formality and documentation is a huge boon when we're running our testing. So looking back at the dossier from earlier in the presentation, this kind of information is like a pen tester's dream, like real documentation. Having something like this or similar records helps provide direction for us. Internally, it helps bolster the communication between the red and the blue team, so it actually puts you in kind of a purple team position to really get some value from there. And externally, it's a time saver, particularly when you're working from the outside. And then when you have something like this, you're kind of hitting the next level. So right here, this is a spreadsheet that was made by Matt Kelly for his B-Side Chicago 2019 talk about adversary emulation with some minor tweaks. And basically, this gives you a list of what kind of attack information there is from a historical perspective. So, the payload and their deliveries, the callbacks, the evasion, maybe commands executed, things that attackers are already doing on the network. And this can really change the game and lets a red team actually do something useful. It's fun to just let red teamers loose on the network and say, go for it, giving a scope and letting us go. But it's better and more valuable and worth the time and money if you actually, provide some documentation, provide some historics, so that red teamers can emulate things that are actually happening. And it also helps us keep focus. It's really easy to get distracted. It's really easy to do things that might not be applicable to your verticals. So when CTI can give us all this information in a nice, pretty package, you get a lot more bang for your buck.
And a brief discussion of purple. In case you're interested, Eric, he's the course author of SANS Sec 599, Defeating Advanced Adversaries. I highly recommend checking out any of the webcasts he does. This is from one of them where he provides practical tips for purple teaming exercises. And then finally, to bring it all together from all the various security teams, the NBA and me can't help but say, hey, track purple ops, track hunt, track the gaps, track also or document the communication and procedural shifts that happen as you're building this out and providing information. So this brings us to business initiatives. I highly recommend if your company doesn't have the 10K or 10Q, and if they do, look at management discussions. That'll save you a ton of time. Just go right to that, and that'll give you the info that you need. Generally with smaller businesses, like when I used to have one, I used to set yearly goals. So ask them, be proactive, ask the business owner, the business leader, hey, what do you want to get done this year? And then there's also the annual reports as well. So you kind of get an idea of where they're headed. Like, let's say they want to build out a third-party something for customers, right? So then I would perform research on the particular third party, maybe inform the people that they could potentially get phishing related to that, especially if it involves money and building the business. And then maybe set up some alerts or something. Google alerts will work just as well as anything else for any particular attacks that might happen at the third party. Like, basically, it's your job to come up with as many creative solutions as possible to help support the business in their initiatives and making money. So it's kind of like, it's also similar to prospecting and sales. So I highly recommend working a little bit on your soft skills, such as sales and marketing, because essentially it'll be your job to talk to these people and try to convince them as to why they want extra work. Which is reading your reports or your information. So if you can spin it in a way that they're willing to listen to you, and then also to know that not everyone's gonna wanna listen to you or consume your data. So just take it with a grain of salt, move on to the next one, and just try to provide value. So to wrap it up, the point is squeezing more value out of your internal data. Any org can use this regardless of your skill set. And the best thing about adversary detection pipelines is that it encourages collaboration between the various teams with a common goal or mission. So, and I would like to thank my special guests that joined me today. They got ready for this virtual con talk in probably less than 7 days. They had to read and go through all of the information and material, get up to speed, understand new terms, be able to actually say the terms, like, because CTI, there's just a lot of stuff. Like, you can't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm gonna do it. Like, it requires training and help and information. So those are their Twitter handles. And if you want a copy of the slides, feel free to go to bit.ly/GRIMMCon-2020, and GRIMMCon is all capitalized. And we also, the next slides here are references. And if you want the actual reference list, hit me up. I'm Cheerio. So CH33R10, send me a DM and I'll get those to you. And thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of GRIMMCon. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, thank you all. We have a first question. There are a lot of CTI threat providers out there. Seems like they're popping up like mushrooms. How do you discriminate to find the good ones versus those that provide the same information as everyone else?
What is helpful is to grab something that you already know and then find out if they have it in their stuff. And if they can't meet that level, definitely notate that and give your feedback to management. So, I mean, and I'm talking something basic, like an FBI flash report, right? They should have that information in there, or at least comment on it or something, right? Something that's very basic. Test them, see if it's there. If not, move on.
So Xena, you and I have talked quite a bit about this over the last month or so, and I think you also have some further places that you're going to be taking your research. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So I will be speaking at ThoughtCon, and then I'll also be speaking at NOLACon as well. I'm in the process of doing a bunch of research, and I call it indicators of emulation. So, sorry, I'm such a nerd. Okay. So I'm doing the research for like a paper that I may or may not submit to IEEE. I can't even say it, IEEE. So then I was going to include that in here if I get permission from the lawyers. So that's a phase as well. And then Tim Fraser, he actually has a really awesome purple teaming platform that also incorporates Scythe. And so I was looking, if I have time, I would love to do like a demo with that as well to show people how you can grab the information, whether it's the indicators of emulation or the threat intel data, and then make a purple team exercise. So, and then leverage Tim's tools. So we'll see.
All right. Well, I hope you all join us in the expert channel in Discord for any further questions and comments with the audience. Thank you all for an awesome presentation.
Oh, thanks
Thank
for having us,
Thank you.
Bryson. Thank you, Grim. Bye.